this episode of our lockdown series. We'll be covering GDPR, so thank you so much for your time and sharing your insight. If you don't mind, I'll ask you a question that I'm sure you'll have a great insight in, because given the scale of change recently, particularly around sort of remote working, HR's involvement and sort of mass hiring with certain employers kind of coping with the situation, what are the areas of GDPR that you feel should be reviewed by companies now?
Well, the first thing to mention is that GDPR is still effective. It's still happening. Just because everyone's working from home, you can't get away from it and ignore it. So training is probably a big issue. A lot of people are working from home for the first time. As an employer, you need to remind them that they've got to be careful with data. It's maybe being used on their own devices. So review bring your own device, use your own device policies. Remind people about safety of data, password protecting spreadsheets so that your kids aren't accidentally sharing it with their friends. We're all sharing devices now. You don't have to appear on TikTok or.
No, that's it.
Yeah. And then plan for the lifting. This will end 2 weeks, 2 months, some point. So you need to plan for how are you going to bring everyone back in. Will you be asking them to bring their devices into work, to wipe them down so security can check them? Are you going to change your policies of working from home and let people carry on? In which case, probably in-depth training and a refresher is required. So, it's common sense when you start thinking about data protection, but data protection probably isn't top of your list at the moment.
Yeah. So if companies are required to make those changes, what sort of timescales do you think that they should be mindful of?
Well, GDPR went live in 2018. So I'm hoping that most people have A, heard of this, and B, are probably pretty compliant. The ICO are still working and hackers are still working. So, they can't get away from data compliance. If you've got a workforce that are now working from home for the first time and accessing data, then you need to start thinking about this now if you haven't already. You need to start sending them little reminders that they need to think about the data security. Don't start, printing everything off and sitting in the park on your own, obviously, and reading all of it and just chucking it in the paper bin in the park. That's not secure. So you should be thinking about it now. But if you're not compliant yet, now's the perfect time. There's lots of companies offering GDPR training online. I've actually done a couple of refresher courses myself because the deals are really cheap at the moment. So you're not having to invest hundreds and hundreds of pounds to get a refresher, and then start writing policies, making sure that what happened is compliant. And then, obviously, once we're back to normal, give me a shout. I can come and do an independent audit for you if you want.
Fantastic. And given the way that the companies perhaps are looking at the economic forecasts and the way that things are sort of performing, so can they, would it be right for companies to put things like this on the back burner? Can they afford to prioritise it, or is that something that they shouldn't do?
No, hackers are having a field day at the moment because data's flowing here, there, and everywhere, and people aren't applying their usual level of due diligence over data. It is exceptional circumstances, but those hackers are going to try and make money. The ICO are still working. If you have a data breach, you are still obliged to report that data breach to the ICO. Those fines, 4% of global turnover, are still there. The ICO still have the powers to stop you sharing data. So could you imagine that scenario now when we're all working from home? If the ICO goes, can't share data, you stop working. And even if you're a small company, misuse of data or the inappropriate use of data is still a massive liability. Before lockdown, the ICO were fining people, individuals, 3 months gross salary, and that's like dental nurses, doctor receptionists who've fallen foul of those things.
Wow. Oh, Struth. So if you're So if this all of a sudden becomes on your radar, then how? And I'm sure we're not talking about an item that's not going to be on companies' agenda. We can kind of take that leap of faith that companies take this really seriously. But how do you think they can measure that sort of level of success and levels of compliance, especially in times as so unpredictable as they are now?
From a management perspective, you still need to keep this on your radar. So I'm sure most large companies and probably many mid-sized companies have someone who is named as an accountable person for data security and data protection if they don't have a data protection officer. So that needs to continue. They need to be obviously working with your IT security and InfoSec teams to make sure that, all the barriers are in place. You've got all your virus and malware protection up to date. Talking to your employees to make sure that their virus protections and scans are completed on the laptops or the iPads or whatever other device they're using is in place. Data protection is unfortunately a corporate lifestyle choice. It's not something that you do once and stick it in the drawer. So don't you, instead of getting people to have 3 hours on a conference call, why don't you look up and send them a link so they can do a bit of online training? Breaks the day up and nothing else. Keep on about it, because it's such an easy thing to forget. Everyone is working so hard and is so stressed by this whole COVID-19 thing that this could easily fall between the cracks. And then when we come back to work, you find that you've had data breaches, you've got Trojan horses introduced that is going to be sending your data out to hackers. I think those qualified ethical hackers will be very, very busy once we're live. By the end of the just security testing and breach testing a lot of big systems.
And just as an add-on to that, then, in your view, is there any one person that tends to take responsibility for this area, or do companies sort of do they tend to divide it out? How's it sometimes best to approach it?
Typically, I've seen senior members of the IT team acting as information security, or you may have a data officer, chief data officer, who's got accountability for this. Big companies will probably have a dedicated data protection team and a named data protection officer who is responsible for this. And we'll be looking at new and novel ways of reminding everybody to keep thinking of data protection. Their data, it could be their payroll data and their bank data that's being stolen.
It's a big deal. Absolute big deal. In summary, we kind of the message out there now is to ensure that if you've when continuing to look at this over this period, make sure that the relevant checks and balances are in place. Make sure those designated individuals kind of understand their roles and responsibilities and are executing those to the best of their ability in these times. And then take stock of where you are once we get out the end of this, and then potentially review some of the policies and the processes, and make sure things are more robust, I suppose, for any future events that may be similar.
Absolutely, and it's companies of all sizes. So we're not just talking the big boys, here we're talking about even down to small businesses who maybe it's just one person running it. You still have a responsibility to look after your client data. Those with thousands of employees and thousands of customers.
Oh, fantastic! And drawing things to a close, how are you spending your free time during lockdown then?
Well, I'm trying to homeschool my children. They might be feral and illiterate by the end of this lockdown. Ofsted would probably rank me as could do a lot better. So I'm not changing career and becoming a teacher in any way.
Oh, lovely.
But I'm studying too. Now's the great time to continue with professional development. So I've just done an internal audit certification. I'm doing my Scrum Master qualification. So I'm keeping busy.
Fantastic.
And avoiding the gardening.
Well, look, it's been lovely sharing your insights with you. Thank you so much.